Hello everyone, welcome to my talk. My name is Brian Tay and I'm a student of studying astronomy. So today we are going to look at a very interesting aspect of astronomy, which is the HR diagram of cluster. Let's look at it. So in my research, I've successfully used HR diagram to determine the distance and age of clusters. So today I'm going to present to you the result of my research, and we are going to look at some of the clusters I've listed here. So we'll take a look at a total of 7 clusters. First, let's look at the theoretical background of my study. So how are we going to measure a distance using HR diagram? Well, first we have the zero-age mean sequence. This will measure the absolute magnitude, which will serve as our reference point in our study. Next, we will have the cluster stars. So cluster stars are made out of stars, and for each stars, we categorize them using the temperature and their apparent magnitude. So putting them together, we have a cluster stars. So this will measure the apparent magnitude. So we have a absolute magnitude and an apparent magnitude, and the difference between them is a distance modulus. So to get the distance of the cluster, we just have to use the formula log d equal to small m minus m divided by 5 plus 1. So how do I come to this formula? You can take a look further in my research paper. Next, let's look at the theoretical background of how can we measure the age of the cluster using HR diagram. Now we have to make an important assumption here, which is that all the stars in a cluster will have a similar age. Well, this is not a far-fetched assumption because based on our current understanding of the universe, we know that stars in a cluster, they form roughly at the same time, so they should have a similar age. Now next we have something called the main sequence. Main sequence is the green line as you have seen in the graph here. So main sequence tells us about how a cluster should behave in the normal circumstances. But as time goes by, so stars will burn out, and with that, then lesser stars will be in the main sequence as seen in the purple line here. So you see they deviate out. So how do we measure the age? We just have to see how much they deviate from the main sequence. So the deviation will tell us about the age. Next, this is the experiment data for the measurement of distance in my research. And this is the experiment data for the measurement of age that I've done in my research. Now the detail of it, you can check out my research paper, or in a little while I will provide a summary. Next, based on the analysis of the data, we found that Hades is the nearest to us and M67 is the furthest from us. In terms of age, Mel 20 is the youngest and M67 again is the oldest. Next, in terms of the error, we found that the measured distance and the actual distance correspond quite well in terms of their distance, but in terms of the age, they don't correspond so well. So the reason why will be discussed more in the discussion. Based on the data earlier, we see that there's no direct correlation between distance and age, although coincidentally, M67 is both the furthest and the oldest cluster. Now in terms of the difference between measured and the theoretical value, we see that it's generally similar, except for the age for IC465 and M67. So these two, we consider them as outlier. And the reason why this is an outlier is due to the methodology of how we measure the age. So this will be discussed more in the error part in the next slide. Also in this experiment, we see that the major error comes from the methodology itself. Now the way we are getting the data is that we are relying on human eyes and human perception, which is very inaccurate and contains a lot of data. Now also in the previous slide, we say that there's a larger error in the measurement of age than the measurement of distance. Now this is also due to the methodology of fitting a known sample to a cluster instead of fitting the cluster to a known sample. So let's say we have 10 known samples. Basically, we are saying to the cluster that there's only 10 choices of age. So there's a very big error there. As a conclusion to my research, I conclude that HR diagram indeed can be used to measure the age and the distance of a cluster. However, there's a big obstacle that we need to overcome, which is the heavy reliance on human perception in getting the data. If you are able to overcome this, then the measurement for distance and the age of a cluster can be reliable using the method of HR diagram. Thank you very much.